People are coming in.
Here we go.
People are coming in.
Got to open all the windows, the Q's and the A's and the chats and the.
Yeah. Okay, so here's one that we can bullshit on while. So you know the stupid question where is hot dog a sandwich?
We asked that is a life cycle insights interview question. If you work here, you have answered that under the penalty of it may impact your employment. So.
Well, so same, right? Like it's a fun interview question, but yeah. I heard something the other day that really fucked me up. Is a hot dog just a taco?
See, from a guy who doesn't care for soft tacos, I feel like that's the ultimate shitty soft taco.
Yeah.
I want my tacos to be crunchy because I'm a gringo, and I want my gringo taco. That's a tough one.
And
taco. That's going to wind up in a life cycle insights internal chat at some point.
Well, and then beyond that, what messed me up is last week for the weekend I was in Chicago for a bachelor party, and of course, right, they want to go get deep dish pizza, and I'm sitting the whole damn time. I'm like, fucking Alex, right? Because we're sitting there, Detroit style, Chicago style, New York style, and I'm like,
now you're eating.
And I had it, and I got to say, I'm a fan.
You can enjoy your bread pizza. That's fine.
It's lasagna pizza. It's like lasagna and New York pizza have a love child.
That's an
we need more. We need new material. We need new material.
Yeah.
So get this. I had ChatGPT create the itinerary for my honeymoon. I said, here's how many days. Here's the dates that we're landing. And here's the islands in Greece we want to go to.
Nice.
And it literally, hour by hour, basically said, go here, do this, do that.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
I wonder if I still have the window up and I can share my screen. But no, it was one of those things where I literally was going, oh, crap.
If you do that, your one fan is going to follow you all the way to Greece and stalk you around your honeymoon.
Where's Dean
I like to joke that I impact at least tens of people in my
tens
career.
Of people.
Yeah. Your tens of followers might come join you for your honeymoon. All right. It looks like the people flooding through the door have kind of slowed down.
My mom likes all my LinkedIn posts for me.
Right. Mom's got to do something.
We should probably get going.
Yeah, let's kick this puppy off. You've got some slides over there, right?
Yep. Let me figure out how to use Google Slides because it's super foreign to me.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, software developers love their Google. It's the Office suite sponsored by Crayola. So top button, click a little down arrow, and there's a presentation view, and that'll spit your two windows out.
Yeah, the problem though is I don't have an extra monitor, so I can't really present. So let's do this because perfection is the enemy of progress.
That is a true story. All right, here we go. You can just click the slideshow button and you should be okay.
Well, then it takes up my whole screen and I don't have that.
I see.
I know. Right, someone go fund me. Kyle needs another freaking monitor. Yeah, and now I lost you. Man, I am a mess today, man. Okay, guys. So we have a long one today because Alex and I got some shit talking to do when it comes to vCIO and how a lot of you are doing it wrong.
It's broken.
And I know that's very clickbaity, and I know the graphic we came up with is a little clickbaity, but we actually believe this. And we actually have the math to prove it. Surprisingly. Usually I would just like to stay subjective. So I like how Ray just goes, so you bought RGB lights before getting a second monitor. Yeah. You are doing it wrong. Yeah, I know.
If you knew how much he spent on his camera, you'd know he could afford another monitor. But
yeah, my fancy little new window. So with that being said, if this is your first time joining us, Alex, who the hell are you?
Some guy, right, who ran an MSP for 16 and a half years. Just like most of you guys, I built we grew from an account management practice into a vCIO practice from zero. We went from a break fix shop into being a grown-up, semi-mature MSP before I exited back in 2020. While I was at the MSP, we realized we had some problems that we didn't really have the tools to solve in the space. So I'm also one of the co-founders of Lifecycle Insights. So that's kind of my backstory. I've been in the channel about 20 years. I spend most of my time not on the technical implementation of technology, but really on how to make the technology relationship with your customer suck a little bit less. And that's how I get sucked into these conversations about account management, client success, vCIO, and all these other things that are really very heavily relationship built.
God, you're so good. You're so good. I wish I could elevator pitch myself like that. But who am I? God damn, I ask myself that every damn morning.
You and me both. You and me both.
You're going, why is Kyle texting me at midnight again? I got nothing else to do. And that's a good segue. I am truly a child of the MSP channel. I've been doing this for the last 20 years. I started about when I was 15 years old, back in 2003 or 4, whatever that was, in a little startup called Geek Squad that slowly grew to 1,100 locations, and learned quite a bit along the way as we started to learn the land and expand model through being acquired with Best Buy and the likes. For the last 20 years, I've been working with IT service providers and MSPs as a turnaround guy, getting them to grow without killing the business. And really from there, I helped build a little consulting company to handle a lot of the MSP challenges, and working day to day to get MSPs to a growth level that allows everyone in the company to grow, excel, and exceed their expectations. And, you got to have fun doing it as well. So what are we talking about today, Alex?
Well, we're talking about vCIOs and how we've largely screwed this up as a channel. So I want to start with one of my big pet peeves, and we'll launch from there, which is 95% of MSPs that I talk to, and Lifecycle Insights has 1,000 partners. I promise you I've talked to more than that over the last couple of years as we watch them build all of this. 95% of the ones that I talk to are doing glorified account management, and they call it a vCIO practice. And that's where a lot of the challenge of this came from, where we said, we're going to start this. We're going to talk about in episode 1, we did, the KPIs for account managers. In episode 2, we did KPIs for client success. In the world where you're going to split those humans, or somehow have the same human wearing those 2 hats, trying to juggle those KPIs. And now today we want to talk about how you really, what vCIO really should be, where its loyalty should lie, and how and why it can't be what a lot of folks are doing today.
Yeah, that's a fun one, right? Why can't my vCIO be a quota carrying part of my company?
Everybody's got to pay for themselves, right?
Everyone does have to pay for themselves.
So why don't you tell us how that vCIO is going to pay for themselves?
Well, okay. So I think we got to go back in time a little bit. And I think we need to do a little bit of reorganization. And for you vCIOs that are on this call, and please let us know in the chat if you're vCIO or owner, one of the things we really need to break down is the strategy behind a vCIO and the service that they offer and deliver. Because I think that's critical to this component. Is a lot of us feel like we have to have vCIO, but we truly don't understand the strategy behind it, or the business decision to, do I add this to my service offerings or not? And I see so many of my clients drown in this, I need to force it into my offering because it's what the channel is doing, but they don't do it with a way to find, how do I pay for it? How do I scale it? And how do I make sure it's actually something my company is built to deliver? I think there's a lot that's baked in there. So as you guys have probably gotten used to by now, Kyle did some artwork.
We're seeing the wrong screen. We're still seeing your intro slide.
Oh yeah. Hold on. So 1 second. I apologize.
Kyle's got fancy new buttons today. He's got to figure out how to use them. There we go. I'm gonna hide my camera because I think that'll mean that everybody else can see just your slide. There we go. There we go. Does everybody see Kyle's fancy artwork at the top of the page? I think you do. There we go. And now he's muted himself. That's even better. Give this guy all these buttons, and he doesn't know how to operate them. Ray is disappointed. Ray is judging you because he has all those buttons all figured out already.
You know what? Perfection is the enemy of progress if there's anything for people to learn.
There you go. All right.
Just wing it. So for it turn himself into a cat. Yeah, you get it.
Next week.
What I want to explain. Yeah, right. Okay. Alex, shut up and let me go. So in this, what I want to explain a little bit is some cash flow strategy. And the reason this is important is it eventually leads us to understanding how vCIO services is an actual line of service in your organization and why it does technically differentiate in the whole idea of your business. Now, as an MSP, right, we've talked about the fort, that right, we've talked about the, oh, right, we talked about having that, right, your finance concentration, your ops, your revenue team, right, your technology team. And we have to understand whenever we're bringing in a line of service or an offering in our company, how does it ultimately play into us making a profit so that the company can pay our employees fairly, we can deliver good service, we can have cash flow to support us in some type of economic hardship. So part of this, the way I explain it to my clients is it's quite simple, your business model. You got to find work, you got to do work, you got to get paid, and you have to grow. Because one thing, right, we're all suffering from this year, inflation, cost of living, all these things are causing our costs to go up. And the only way to make sure your margins don't get depleted and you can tell your employees they get a raise in this training and all these other benefits you offer them is your rates have to go up. So we have to big some level of an economic engine. Now, think of this as a funnel, right? Your revenue team brings in dollars in, and as your operations teams deliver that work, that ends up being some level of collection and growth, which leads into some level of profit on the bottom line.
So I'm confused.
You're confused.
Yeah, where's the part where I just try and squeeze a vCIO into the thing I was already delivering and try and figure out how to cover the money on it?
And that is exactly the thing that every one of my clients ask me is, hey, I'm doing this now, but I don't know how they can get all their work done. I don't have time. I don't have the ability. I don't know who to have do it, right? My tier 3 guy can just get it done, or my service manager can just get it done. You start to hear all of these problems because we don't find a way to build in that economic engine to support that service delivery. And this is the very first hurdle we need to accomplish before we just start hiring people or just giving them extra work.
Yeah.
So as a quick deviation, most businesses, if we look at what our clients' funnels look like, right, they're very similar. They find work, they do work, they get paid. But what they don't have, right, is they don't have this technology department down here, right? They don't have a fort, right? So it starts to go into this question of, okay, well, where is IT? And IT becomes a function or a budgeted ability to make profit as an organization. And I think a lot of us as MSPs forget this.
Well, and a lot of our customers actually see this as a cost center, right?
Yeah, exactly. Most businesses, this is only a cost center. And I think at times with being in a channel and being in our own echo chamber, we forget, and I say this very respectfully, but right, we are at the end of the day, we are like custodians. We are an overhead to a business. Now, why the whole idea of a CIO got created was this became such a bigger cost chamber or cost center to a business that we had to find ways to either one, use it to only hit budget so we can get predictable gross profit or net profit, or find ways to reduce operations so that we can increase our gross margin.
So basically what you're saying, for those who don't speak who don't speak finance nerd, what you're saying is that the CIO was created to make technology help us ring the cash register cheaper.
Yes, either cheaper or keep it faster. And that's you're going right into the next level, right? Or maintain that productivity, right? Which is the custodian analogy, right? The bathrooms have to be clean, the computers have to be running.
So now we're talking about a job whose function is to maintain efficiency, when most of us are going to our client talking about buying a widget, selling a gadget, applying a new layer of security. And how many?
And Alex, you can turn your camera back on, by the way.
How many of us are actually talking about operational efficiency when we go to talk to our customer as a CIO? How many of you actually even know how your customer rings their cash register?
And I think that's the important question, right? Is now you're uncovering that layer of, if I am a fractional C-suite for my client, I have to be able to operate in my client's interest to make sure that revenue goes up, costs go down, and we hit a profit that is either greater or equal to the expected output. That's not just selling them hardware, right? That's not just hitting a quota. That is not just making sure the client doesn't walk out the door from like a customer success perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, you should, if you are truly a fractional consultant, do I really care if the MSP, or should I have a reaction to the MSP's business hurdles?
None whatsoever.
So if we think about that, right? If we're not in our, going back to the funnel, right? If we're not here because we can't be quota carrying, or we can't be revenue, I don't want to say revenue generating because that's the wrong word, but if we can't be bringing in new clients.
Quota carrying is the right word, right? If we don't carry a quota,
yeah.
What's the other thing that our vCIO can do to have an impact?
So, right, if we're not top of funnel and we're not bottom of funnel because we're not protecting costs inside of the MSP, the only other layer that you can be in a business is that operational layer, which is trying to make sure that the work that you are doing is revenue generating, meaning you are a cost directly accounted to some form of revenue.
So how do we get there?
So, right, you are traditionally, as we can see, you are an operations employee. Now, just for fun, I went into ChatGPT just to confirm this, and I said, hey, CIO, CTO, it's a definition that gets thrown around quite a bit. And I think we get a little complicated. For most businesses, right, they're very similar. But what was funny when I went through this is at the very bottom, regardless, together, these roles work to ensure that the company's technology infrastructure is effective, efficient, and aligned with the overall business strategy.
So where's security? That's all we talk about anymore.
Right? At the end of the day, that is literally what you are supposed to be doing as a fractional CIO. And I say fractional very purposefully.
Yeah.
Because if we take counterparts, right, look at a fractional CFO, look at me, a fractional CEO, right? There's a level to where you are responsible in the client's interest to grow their business at their targets on their forecasts within their budgets, which means you need to know that. So I kind of summarized it real easily. At the end of the day, right, we got to keep production running, right? We got to make sure we're maintaining our employees, or when I say our employees, right, your clients' employees, that they're working the levels that they're expected to. We need to enhance efficiencies through process or technology, right? Make sure if they can work faster or there's a tool to make them work less hard, make sure that we advise on that. Mitigate risk, which I think is an important one, especially when we get into the cybersecurity one, because if I am mitigating risk, I'm doing that so the company doesn't have to pay out money that they were unforeseen to spend. And protect intellectual property, because I can't have people stealing our IP and running with it. That way they can go be now a competitor to my clients' businesses, and all within budget and forecasted spending. No surprises.
Yeah. So Aaron's asking the smart guy questions over here. He's starting to track where you're tracking. He says, so the KPI structure of the vCIO as an operational objective should be based on the efficiency and profitability of the client org. Now, we may not know their profitability.
It opens up an important question that you should know what their strategy is.
And let's be clear, we don't know we typically don't know our clients' profitability because they're not willing to share it with us. Why aren't they?
Honestly, it's probably because we don't ask.
Well, there's a good part of that, but why wouldn't they be willing to share it with you? If you have a client and you're thinking they'd never tell me that number, why is it? Well, number one is because they don't see you as a member of their C-level leadership team, because I guarantee you everyone who sits at the table in the executive leadership team meeting knows that number. 100%.
Well, and I think, Alex, it's a real important thing to talk about, though, too, because when we start to just give it away, right, you just give away vCIO services, it is now essentially something that it's kind of like account management. I mean, how many of us see account management as a bullet point for one of our providers and we just go, eh? Because, right, to me, it sounds like it's account management when they give it to me for free.
Yep.
So the important question goes to, are we so valued in our vCIO services that the client needs to essentially be paying for us to be doing these and sitting in on their board meetings.
So there was a scribble on your drawing there earlier that you didn't really focus on, but under operations, you had the word utilization. I think that's what this all circles back to, right? We have an employee who shouldn't be on a quota carrying commission salesperson, right? There's a chat going on about what should be commissioned, and I'm okay with Ray's right. I wouldn't call them commissions if we're paying them on KPIs. They're really bonuses. But you know, there's nothing wrong with bonusing an employee on hitting the right stride, right? I think it was backwards a little bit into the fort somewhere. You mentioned utilization. Right there. Yep. When you zoomed in here, right under operations, how do we bill operational people, or how do we track and metric operational people? Well, we're focused on utilization. So if we
100%, and right, that's why when I say the term revenue generating just means that you have a cost center that's going to bring you revenue. Now, if we're already agreed that operations is now where vCIO is sitting, that means that those services, right, and I'm calling it services are important, should have a level of revenue associated with it. And I bet you right now, for the MSPs in this chat, they haven't bundled in somehow a dollar amount into their vCIO services if they've decided to just give it to a client.
I'd love to hear I'd love to hear people in the chat give us their, have you put a dollar value on the vCIO service that's a part of your contract, even if you don't show it to the customer. As part of a bundled price that you give to the customer, is there, hey, $100 a seat for stack and for help desk and for the junk, the commoditized parts of our services, and then an additive $50, $100, whatever per user for CIO services, or is it per hour that we expect to spend on that contract? How are you breaking that out so that we can actually track utilization? And are you breaking it out?
Well, and I think, right, this is where economy of scale kicks in. If we're not charging for it and it's a revenue generating service, how can you ever expect to have money to hire future vCIOs as you add on more and more and more clients?
Yep.
Because to me, right, and for those of you that saw me at IT Nation, I broke down how to deconstruct your MSP profitability. There's a fantastic book called Profit First, where they rearranged essentially how you think of your profitability in a business. And one of those strategies is that profitability in your service organization should be an expectation that defines a budget where that services can go ahead then and carve up if you're selling an all-you-can-eat product. So if we're going to make the decision to then allow that to be a variable cost, I need to go into that managed services product and say, hey, how big do I expect this pie to be based off of my economy of scale with my client, my profit per X, if I use a Jim Collins term, to say, how do I grow that? And if I don't decide to do that, right, then I need to think on the other line of the services that we offer to where maybe it's more of a retainer model to where there's some level of hours that the client is required to purchase from me to get this service.
You first said that to me 6 months ago or so. You said that to me a long time, quite a while ago now, what feels like ages ago. And your explanation for that was fantastic. So I don't want to let that concept slide by. The fact that we're actually charging for a vCIO and trying to work in utilization and saying that on this contract, we expect 4 hours of vCIO every month. What Kyle said to me in the beginning, and he may not even remember saying it, was that what happens when all of it's lumped together as just services and the help desk goes over on hours 1 month, right? We're tempted not to deliver those vCIO services.
Yeah, and what I had said, I think, in that conversation, because I also did it in my talk at IT Nation, is, right, if we go to this example where my expense budget for a $2,000 revenue client, and this is blended with just your basic MSP, and I want best-in-class margin at 65%, as a service manager, I can only spend $700 to service this client. And that is everything in this pie, right? Yep. That is your tier 1, that is your tier 2, and God forbid you have a tier 3 guy touch that ticket, because his $100 effective rate is going to completely make your client unprofitable.
Yep.
So now what I have to do basically is throw away this vCIO service if I want to hit my margin expectation, if I did not purposefully, intently put in a number of fixed hours into the contract.
And
right? If we do the traditional model.
And I'm hearing people say, or I'm seeing people say in the chat that they've priced it into small accounts or that they haven't really publicized it to their vCIOs. If you don't tell them what their metric is for an account, how can they hit it? Right. So now we're basically telling them, go work on whatever account you feel like, not the account that your utilization says, hey, 4 hours here, 4 hours here, 4 hours here. You should be able to spread it out throughout the month and figure out what the right deliverables are for these clients based on those numbers.
Well, and I want to correct the language because I just see Brett, he posted, we don't charge for vCIO and it's built into our overall cost. That we can't use those statements. You do charge for it. It is just part of the pricing that you give your client.
Right.
It's 100% billable. And if we try to say that it's free, then you are literally saying, okay, I am losing money. I'm paying my client to be their vCIO.
Yep.
So how do I have the ability as an economy of scale to build a business to where I can support my vCIOs to say, hey, for every 25 users, you get 4 hours of vCIO every month. I have to have intent to carve out that pie to say managed services, help desk, you do not touch those 4 hours in your $800 budget.
Yep. So we came here to talk. Absolutely, we're devaluing the service offering. We're trying to tell folks that we're able to deliver this high-end service without charging them anything for it. And we all know, doesn't matter. And perfect example, at Lifecycle Insights, we did a boot camp where we taught really in depth how to build out a vCIO program. We gave that boot camp away 1 month and we had 25 people sign up for it. And on week 4, we had 2 people in the room. The exact same boot camp, when we charge for it, we have close to 50 people sign up for it. And guess what? On the last week, almost every seat is still full, right? This is just perceived value at work. And this is
someone used to always say, what did you ever get for free that was worth it?
Right. Nothing. And that's the beauty of this, is that if you start to break it out to your customer, they will start to see and understand the value of it. They'll want to show up for the strategic meetings because they paid for them. They'll want to get value out of them. They'll want to see progress and change and improvement in the business. But it also gives your vCIO a set number of hours to say, hey, you know what? I had 8 hours blocked for this account and I performed most of what I needed to do in 4. Now I've got 4 hours to go to this customer, learn how they ring the cash register, and help to deploy operational efficiencies that can speed that up. Because I think if we're being honest, 80, 90, 95% of our vCIOs don't even understand how a dollar moves through our customer's business between multiple line of business applications and where we might be able to deploy some of the same integrations we use in our MSP to tie things together, automate things, make data move smoother. And that's really where the value is for our customer in all the services we provide. Now
it's almost infuriating, right?
That's I felt myself getting a little worked up talking about that.
I get pissed off too, because, and I've learned this obviously through doing a lot of fractional C-level work in my life, is if you are giving it away for free, they're not going to take it seriously, and you will never have the economy to scale that. And you will then just be handcuffing your vCIOs, whatever you refer to them as, to go find quota. Now you're forcing them to go sell things because that's the only way you can pay for them. In your mind, you're justifying it because from a root perspective, you never had a strategy to understand, should I even offer this service? Like I ask a lot of my clients in a very strategic or visionary way, is this something you even want to do? Because it's not just your outsourced help desk. It's not just your account management. It is true consulting. Like you mentioned, Alex, you might have to go dive into a line of business app you've never heard of, call those vendors and say, hey, what the hell? Our contract's about to terminate and we haven't talked about our new pricing. How do you have time to do that or have the time to be purposeful and proactive to do that?
Yep.
Right. Like you mentioned, at first, I even need to know what their budget is because I am on the C-suite with them.
Correct.
And that's why I get pissed off, because you're not being a fractional C-level right now. You are being an order taker. You're being reactive, and you're giving the CIO title a bad name.
Right? You're an account manager with some level of technical aptitude and technical skill. And so Miguel's asking, do you charge four hours per month working on an account up to the QBR? And I think that depends on what your QBR is. This is another thing that is so subjective, and no two people on the channel are doing it the same. But if your business review with your client includes improving customer outcomes, helping them achieve efficiencies, helping them achieve the goals that drive the rest of the business, then absolutely you're delivering enough value that you can have a conversation about charging for that with your customer. If you're just showing up to your customer and saying, you bought most of my stuff, will you buy more of my stuff? And hell no, you can't charge that. When was the last time we went to the car dealership and said, I'd like to pay to have a salesman follow me around and try and sell me some shit, which is what we typically do and call it a vCIO. And that's where you can tell Kyle and I both get a little bit wrapped around the axle on this. We have slides with KPIs on them, and we have to make sure we get that far. Maybe we should go there. And,
I think we're fine on time though, just because I think you're about to hit something.
Okay.
Which is, I think this is where QBRs, honestly, and I'm gonna get flamed for saying this, were a stopgap to create a process because we didn't understand our clients' businesses. Because if you truly are a fractional C-suite, there is no QBRs. You're showing up to the quarterly board meeting.
Yeah, you're going to send me.
You are showing up to that quarterly board meeting, and you have your own agenda.
QBRs showed up in the MSP space right after we bought RMM tools.
Mm-hmm.
We bought RMM tools. We were told we can solve for 85% of our tickets remotely. We don't have to go visit our customers. We don't have to roll trucks. You can save money. And with that saved money, you can spend boatloads of money with the big three, the big four, the big whoever, these companies who are selling you stuff. And so then they came back and said, oh, what do you mean your customers don't like you anymore? What do you mean you're having trouble selling new products and services? Well, that hurts us. We can't expand and sell more RMM licenses. Maybe you should go sit down with your customer and justify your existence. Do this thing called a QBR. And that's where QBRs landed in this space.
Can I brag at you for 2 hours?
And we've been trying to fix that for 10 freaking years because they broke this in actually 15 years ago. We've been trying to fix the QBR ever since, because we walked into our customer and said, let me show you all the great things I do for myself. I'll pat myself on the back for an hour and a half, and then I'll leave and you'll love me again because I justified my existence. And it didn't work. Our customers started responding to our request to have a strategic meeting with, you know what, I think everything's running okay. I don't need you to come sell me anything. We're good.
And you know what? I feel bad because like Miguel's question about 4 hours per month for the QBR. I can tell you right now, as a fractional executive, one of the biggest things you learn is that you need to be talking to your client a lot more than just showing up for the quarterly business review or the board meeting that your client is having. And let's be frank, a lot of your companies, a lot of your clients in the MSC sector, they're under 20 employees. They're not big enough to have a true fractional CIO. So account management and customer success is enough.
Yeah. Yep.
So one of the things, when you truly have fractional C-suites, they may need to have a threshold of a minimum of 50 employees and 4 C-suites.
Yep. So
because they're not mature enough in their own process to talk about a lot of these things.
And we're not trashing what the strategic conversation you're trying to have with your customer. What we're saying is there is a level where that's appropriate and enough. And there's a level where you have a board of directors who has to be presented to now with some cybersecurity training and education and those kind of things. And that's going to become more and more a requirement of insurance, or requirement of compliance, or requirement of, like, banks are required now to have someone with cyber liability or with cybersecurity experience on the board. So you have to go have that conversation with that person. You can't queue it up to your local point of contact and go, hey, carry these reports into the board, you'll be fine. We have to carry that in there. So Miguel, to your point, I think the answer is it depends, but you should be having more conversations with your customer than just a QBR, especially as your customer works up the maturity chain, right? There might be a service delivery meeting every month that's 15 minutes. That's just, are our services on track? Are we meeting our KPIs? Are we doing everything that we're supposed to do? Are we meeting our SLAs? Do you still love me? Great, moving on. And then there's a tactical strategic leadership where we actually work on direction of the company and how tech supports it. And that's a different conversation. And then there may be a board conversation. And all of those have to roll into the hours that you've equated to that customer to support it.
And I think this is where, right, if this ever got traction, someone would really have to come out with the way that you do fractional consulting as a C-suite, because it is so different than what a lot of people are doing vCIO work, that we're not talking apples to apples. So Miguel, the problem is we're talking it from a fractional C-suite perspective and not devaluating your times to be just a gimme, right? Where there is a juxtaposition now to where how we've been doing it is really just a technical account manager. So it really becomes a metamorphosis of, is this a service I want to sell? And I think Wes might be on our call. And one thing I did want to touch on, right, is how does cybersecurity fit into a lot of this? Because the CISO title comes out quite a bit, right? When we're talking about going right back to it, right, the goal of all of our clients is revenue, cost, and profit, right? At the end of the day, this needs to be expected, this needs to grow, and this needs to keep the business running. So if we think about that, right, where cybersecurity started to really become a talking point is this mitigating risk and protecting IP right? Here's where cybersecurity now becomes a talking point about business strategy with your client, because you are now proposing risk to them. You're not selling them cyber or phishing or whatever just to sell it to them. You're showing them that, hey, if we don't do this, there is no way in hell we are ever going to hit our profit, because it's only a matter of time before we have to go spend out a bunch of Bitcoin money because of some crypto locker, or someone gets our IP and we got to go into legal litigation, or compliance happens and we get a massive fine. And right where a lot of this comes into play is, right, the value that your service as a fractional consultant or a fractional C-suite comes into play is you need to find a way to get margins to be where they're expected or grow, right? I did my carrot backwards, did this last night at like 10 o'clock. We need to reduce technical waste, right? How many of our clients have 365 seats that we are right now paying for that no one is using?
Or
right? There's so much technical waste.
365 that we
yes,
don't
overlapping suites, overlapping tools, right? You're not actually looking at the client's stuff.
Yep.
You need to make sure you only operate within budgets, because if anything beyond that budget needs a business case, which in the example of Miguel, QBR, client, here's, you guys decided to veer pace, you guys decided to grow faster or change your ERP or whatever, we need to spend more money beyond the budget. Let's discuss how to do that, Mr. CFO. Right? System uptime is extremely critical because their own employees have utilization targets they need to hit, which means if they're down, they can't hit their utilization targets, which means their gross margin is failing. Spending needs to always be controlled when it comes to SaaS apps now, and the marketing team buying a new toy every week because, hey, it's a 14-day free trial and only $8 a user a month. Are you talking to your marketing team? And then financial legal safeguards, right? You can't have surprises in the spending. So if we want to make KPIs, and right, this is where we have some that we can present and show, these need to be the outcomes that you tell your client why they should be paying you $1,000 a month for vCIO services, whether it's bundled in my contract or something that's a retainer model.
And for those of you who say my customers aren't mature enough to care to have dialed in margins and KPIs for every customer or for every employee and be having those conversations, maybe you have a client who isn't ready for vCIO services.
They're not your target market. It's a totally different TAM than your MSP client sometimes.
Well, and it may be an okay managed services client. You may be able to manage their network and keep them secure and do all the things that we do. You may be able to give them a technical account manager to help them build a technology budget. But that's not to say that you're going to engage with them at the level of a true CIO to help them manage risk, manage it to the budget, manage uptime and efficiencies and all of those other things. So, think about that not every customer, and I got flamed last time I said not every customer deserves a QBR. I'm sure it's going to be even worse when I say not every customer deserves a true CIO service.
And, Miguel, thank you very much, by the way, Miguel, for continuing to ask questions. And if for others, I know we're talking about something extremely high level. So if any of the terminology we've used is not in your normal vernacular, please ask, because I use a lot of financial terminology as well. But, Miguel, I think it's a complicated thing here, because traditionally, a lot of the MSPs I work with, they're terrified to have separate line items on their quotes or invoices to their clients. So, right, we wanted to bundle it in because it's a safer way to have a relationship with our client. But as you can see, there is a juxtaposition to not putting it as a separate line item, because the client now doesn't have perceived value, even when the sales rep may have said, hey, it's $100 a user a month or $200 a user a month nowadays, to where that includes 2 hours per user per month of vCIO. If we don't break that down for them, then of course they're just going to be like, no, put it all into help desk. And you're just going to continue to do help desk.
The larger fear is having to divvy out the vCIO. So this goes right back to, if I don't know where this is the same as an engineer. Like when we're talking about a utilized resource, do you know where your engineers get divvied out to? Do you know how many hours they put into a contract? You better. You should know that for your account managers, or they're not getting used. So Aaron, you're spot on. Like, we have to stop being afraid that I can't divide up this resource. I should be able to very specifically divide up this resource, so I know what he costs me, so I know what my costs are on my contracts, so I know that I'm making money.
Well, yeah, right. If I'm charging 4 hours per 25 users for vCIO every month, or some type of scalable model with a retainer or bundled, whichever, right? I know then that if my vCIO, based off the price I sell it, which is a 2.5 multiple his hourly cost, which is normal consulting rates, Sorry, I said that fast. Your normal consulting rate should be 2.5 times to 3 times their burden hourly rate. So if I make $50 an hour, that's like 60 something dollars an hour fully burdened. Multiply that by 2.5, and that's a fair margin to sell for them. Now, if I'm doing that it's a utilized resource and you are at 90% utilization, that's billable utilization, probably time to go hire another vCIO.
Yeah.
And it's paid for, right? We're not in a deficit. We're making healthy margins at that point. Right. It's not just bundled in. It's not a free give me ebook that I got a fucking lead magnet on a website that a sales guy's going to keep blowing me up on. This is a truly paid service.
Hire one, right? We're going to hire one, and then he's going to continue to scale until he can't do any more work.
Mm-hmm. And then if you want to look at good models, right, go look at a McKinsey, go look at a Deloitte. Want people that sell consultants on a regular basis. Scaling consulting, I know firsthand. I've done it in my own company. Scaling consulting is very difficult.
Talking about it from help desk for years, right? We've got to get our help desk techs utilized. We've got to identify where their time goes. I'm going to argue that you should be at least tracking all of the time for your account managers, right? And too many of us lose that time. But if you can't see where that time goes, that evaporates into your contracts, and you could have an account that spends $1,000 a month with you, but chews up 4 hours of your account manager every month. Guess what? You're not making money on that contract. So we need to be tracking all of this for the account manager. This is not something that we're selling. It's just something that we need to be tracking so we know how it impacts us. They should be selling. They should have KPIs that reflect the products and services that they're upselling, the renewals that they're doing with our customers, those kind of things. Our CIO is going to have a different set of KPIs that lean heavier into being a utilized resource. So let's go talk about those before we run out of time to have that conversation.
Yep, but timesheets are hard. I don't like timesheets. They're micromanaging me. If, by the way, guys, I do have a whole conversation on deconstructing profit on YouTube. I go deep into these conversations about utilization and timesheets. It involves breaking kneecaps as well, so it's fun. Okay, so getting into the KPIs. So here's where we really started to break it down, and we want to keep this targeted for everybody because we've had so many of these calls. By the way, we are going to do a 4th call, guys, to talk about how do I scale these 3 roles as I grow my MSP, and how do I have one person sit in 2 seats and then one person sit in 3 seats, and when do I hire that 3rd person? So we're going to probably do that in a couple of weeks. And we're also considering, by the way, guys, of making this a recurring training based off all the seats in the MSP fort. So if you would be interested in that, please give us some feedback on that. But looking at these KPIs, what we really want to start to deconstruct, right, is the account manager as a recap, right? These are your quota carrying people. These are the people that are looking at top of funnel. Are we bringing in enough revenue to scale our organization? And then customer success, right? This is really going to be defined as, are our clients profitable? And at the same time, are they making sure that they're not churning? So if they don't churn, right, then we can keep that funnel in and the account managers don't have to work as hard. And now that we've gone into vCIO, what we've really been talking about, and no surprise that you guys saw this, right, is realized utilization. Why this is said realized utilization and not just utilization, these are hours that are directly applicable to your clients. So think of it as billable utilization. So we've beaten that one over like a dead horse, I think.
Yep.
QBRs delivered. Interesting there, Alex. Want to explain that?
Well, if this person's job is to have strategic conversations with our customers, to get involved with our client at an executive leadership level, then they've got to be actually having meetings that matter, right? This can't just be phone calls and check-ins and one-time appointments with my point of contact. We've got to actually deliver. They probably have an expected number, and this goes back into how do we actually make sure that we're using our utilization properly. One CIO can't do 200 QBRs a month. They can't do 200 QBRs a quarter. They probably can't do 200 QBRs a year. That's 1 per working day. So this is one of those where it's not the KPI that I'm looking to hire and fire based on, but this is the KPI that I look at to say, do I have reasonable expectations of this person? Because there are only a certain number of meetings that they can do, and there certainly should be a minimum that is expected based on the number of customers that they work with.
Mm-hmm.
So really, this is about, let me just finish that one. This is really about QBRs delivered should probably be a percentage of those expected, right? If they were expected to do 25 a quarter, and we're expecting them to hit 95% of that, right? 1 or 2 customers can cancel, 1 or 2 customers can push. If they're only hitting 70%, there's a problem with the perceived value of that offering, and we have an issue there.
And there's also guys here, there's a thing, I know we've been talking negatively about QBRs a little bit, but there's a level to where that's the terminology we have. So, right, there is a level to where QBRs is something we can track today because it's similar terminology for everybody. So if my QBRs are done with my client, just think about that. That's that quarterly business meeting that you're having with your client, that board meeting, that I'm understanding their goals and whether I have something to sell them or I just need to give them a budget report. That's what I need to deliver in there. Yep. Risk reduction, right? I think this is a harder one, I think, to track a little bit, but I think this is having an understanding to whether, like, let's not complicate the KPI, right? Yeah. If there are known risks in the organization that client has, we need to present them. And if they have 200, right? Then let's just put a KPI. You have 200 today, Mr. Client, and over the next 3 years, it's our goal to get you to 75. And you just track that simple KPI.
Yeah, this goes right back to, hey, if I'm aligning with a framework, if I'm using NIST or CIS, right, and I had to mark 27 things on an assessment as out of alignment and broken, hey, I've got some percentage of items that are aligned with best practices, some percentage of items that pose a risk to this customer. And what we should be seeing is a continued reduction in risk to the customers who are engaged with a CIO. So again, keep it a simple KPI, like Kyle said, like, let's not overcomplicate it.
Holistic audit management, right? This kind of gets closer to what we know vCIO of some type of stack alignment, or, are there life cycles that they need to be approached? But I think it's a little different in the way we're framing it, and that the strategy with the client, right? There needs to be an onboarding to vCIO, I think, right? Where I spend even my own process, it takes me 90 to 120 days to fully onboard a client as a fractional C-suite, which means that I need to have a full understanding of their business so I can present them plans, strategies, budgeting. And you guys probably should too, which makes these holistic audits and management a lot easier because you show them your 3-year roadmap, Mr. Client, and we're going to work our way. And every month I'm going to report to you where we are in this audit. Did we get to terms? Did we spend the cash? Do we need the CFO just to approve it? So yes, there is a little bit of revenue built in here, but they're not the ones writing the quote, right? They're the ones where I'm the CIO for my client. I'm going to go to my account manager, Mr. MSP, and I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, get us a quote for this server, right? We already talked about what we need. You don't need to do any fact finding because I'm the consultant.
And as we think about this, you mentioned onboarding. How can a CIO possibly walk into your customer and know how they run their business, how they ring their cash register? We haven't onboarded and learned all that, right? It is a great learning and educational process, because I promise you, the tier 2 engineer who owns that client and knows everything about every application, or what you think is everything about every application, it's really just how to install it and support it. It's not how this application pulls data off of a CAD machine and how it shoves it into this application that does something else with it, and goes through 10 different touch points before it rings a cash register and actually creates an invoice that the customer can bill for.
Which I think that rolls into that last one, right? Budget submitted. You know how many of your clients probably have done part of their budgeting process, figured out IT based off your roadmap? None. So there's a process where you guys have to help them, right? You can't just force feed this stuff. You got to really build in a white glove offering to your consulting to say, hey, Mr. Client, we probably have 300 grand in IT stuff we need to spend over the next 3 years. So I'm going to help you in the October. When you start your budgeting process, Mr. Client? October? Great. Can we have a call October 15th? Because what I would like to do is find a way to where we can start to chip away at this next 3 years, right? No surprises. Yeah. And if they have no surprises, guys, they're never going to say no to your quote. They're never going to say no to the account manager, because they have someone on the C-suite from your company sitting in board meetings saying, hey, if we want a 30% growth this year, and we're going to need a lot more computers, we're going to need a lot more AWS storage, we're going to need now it's starting to become you are truly helping your client.
And if there's a no coming, your CIO is going to know it a mile away if they're really engaged at that level, right? Where they're going to hear growth isn't what we think it ought to be. Revenue isn't what we think it ought to be. There's not enough margin to go replace all the equipment that we were planning to replace, right? So now the C-suite's having that conversation without you today. And if you're getting a seat at that table, you're having a bigger impact. The budget is the #1 most impactful document that comes out of Lifecycle Insights. It is the #1 thing that our customers come back and say, holy crap, that was a drop mic moment. If you're not helping your client with budgeting, and by budgeting, I do not mean showing them a list of things you're going to charge them for next year. Budgeting is all of technology. Okay. Budgeting is account management says, these are all the things I'm going to invoice you for next year. Right. That's an account management function. Budgeting is, what do you spend on the, the trash, technology disposal organization? What do you spend on your printers? What do you spend on your line of business apps? The ones I don't charge you for. What do you spend on your cyber liability insurance? What's the maintenance on the camera system? What's the maintenance on the internet connected toaster? Right? All of that goes into the technology budget. That is what a C-level would do, who owns a department who's responsible for billing for your customer, for budgeting for that department for your customer.
And I think, giving full due diligence on this, that's where cybersecurity now turns into being proactive. And is it just something where our clients feel like it's FUD? Because you're no longer trying to scare them into, oh, you need to get phishing training, you need cyber awareness, you need all this other things. You are truly talking to them of like, hey guys, if we're trying to double our client size or our employees size, we're opening ourselves up for phishing, risk, ransomware, whatever, IP issues, we need DLP. Now you're talking to them of going, hey, we know this is going to happen, which means we need to protect ourselves. It's going to suck. I'm sorry. Wish it wasn't this way. Yep. But this is the only way we can do to make sure our employees are utilized and utilized well. You're now talking to them on a business level. And
if they ask you what utilization is, and you have a pretty good idea whether or not this customer is a prospect for full CIO services, right? You can have some conversations, right? Maybe they use different language, but you can start to peel back that onion and go, well, utilization is a KPI that we use in our organization to determine whether or not our engineers are doing enough work to justify their existence. How do you justify your employees' existence? And maybe they'll unwrap that with you. Maybe they just go, my gut kind of tells me. Right.
And if that's the case, they need to hire a CFO before they hire a CIO.
There you go. And maybe a fractional CFO, which is a real thing, unlike a vCIO, which we just imagined and created up as and created as an industry. So,
but we can draw a lot of parallels. I've been thinking about this longer and longer, where we are going through the same metamorphosis that the finance department went through, right? Where they started off with fractional accounting and then they went to bookkeeping. And then, right, you saw bookkeeping firms and finance firms and wealth management. And then around 2008, when all the collapses happened, companies couldn't afford their CFOs anymore. So the birth of the fractional CFO happened out of managing costs and saying, I need CFO intellectuals, but I can't afford them full time.
Correct.
So it's no surprise to me that this is starting to happen. We just need to take an example from our counterparts as fractional departments to say, hey, how do we do it like CFOs do?
Well, and we keep tying these connections back to finance. It really is the best example of where technology is going, right? Even down to, I have a certified accountant. What are we talking about in IT, right? How do we get an MSP who we know knows their stuff, right? What separates the men from the boys? And all of these different states now are talking about, how do we identify an MSP? And we all kind of feel like we know some certification, something feels like it's coming down the pipeline. You only have to look as far as accounting to see where.
And the finance vertical, and want to talk compliance? My God, there's gap accounting, right? There's an entire, they literally have decided as a whole, right, where they are completely fundamentally standardized on how they all deliver service. And there is more compliance on that side, right? The whole IRS exists, right? There's a whole branch of our government that's been around for the last 40 years. But we have to keep in mind that they've had the last 30, 40 years to mature. We're only 15, maybe 10 years into this, guys.
True story. So we got a couple unanswered questions. The first was vCIO pricing model. I think we kind of touched on that, but I think you need to really dive into that personally in your organization. It's not going to be the same for everyone. It's going to depend on the level of in-depth service that you offer. It's going to depend a little bit on your vertical and how demanding they are. If you have folks in finance like banking, they're going to require more work from your CIO. They're going to need more hours. But as far as pricing, look at what you pay that human. Look at what you would have to pay that human. And to Kyle's point, 2.5 to 3x what their loaded cost to you is, right? Their fully burdened cost. So if you're hiring yourself a $50 or $75 an hour person to do that work, you've got a pretty heavily burdened cost there, and you need to reflect that in the billing. This is probably the most expensive person on your staff as far as billable hourly rate. Am I wrong on that, Kyle?
I mean, if you think of all the things that we've gone into, right? Understanding budgeting, understanding a P&L, understanding forward thinking,
Business
right? You
operations.
need someone, right? You need someone that's experienced. And I know a lot of, honestly, MSP CEOs that would be great. And I know many MSP CEOs that probably wouldn't be great at this process. And I hate to say it, but we still suck at understanding business and business strategy as MSPs.
Yep.
So, right, there is that level. And I saw someone asking about, like, where do I get education on how to be a C-suite or a CIO? I don't know, because I commonly still to this day have to teach CEOs of MSPs on how to read a P&L, how to read a balance statement.
We're seeing some things come around on, true CIO training. There are some things that you're not seeing them on your side yet as MSPs. I'm hearing mumblings from folks about launching some trainings for these. So stay tuned. If we hear them, if you don't follow Kyle and I on LinkedIn, follow us on LinkedIn, because as soon as we hear about these, as soon as they start to go live and become a real thing, I don't want to promise anything from somebody who I haven't told I was going to promise their fancy new services, but I know some folks who are working on this. A couple of them might be worthwhile, and we'll talk about them for sure, and maybe even bring them on and have a conversation about it, because I think this is huge. It's definitely something that needs to happen. Some of our friends, Kyle, are actually recording some of this content as we speak. So some of this is coming down the pipe and going to be available. So keep your eye peeled, and we will be talking about it.
And right, that's why I hinted, guys, we're thinking of doing like a weekly or bi-weekly half-hour thing, Alex and I, just going over some of these fundamentals on how to be strategic in your business as MSPs. And this is why we're attacking it seat by function by seat, because it's really helping you guys understand this education. So, right, we're going to continue to do this. So to also look at the newsletters that right now Lifecycle is sending out. We might change that branding at some point. We haven't decided. But to where we're here to train you guys. So give us feedback on what the next layer of what you want to learn is. And we'd be more than happy to throw a webinar together. I mean, this got all birthed out of a Reddit comment.
Yeah, this came from a Reddit comment. So if there's anything else you'd like to hear, if there's anything else that you'd like to see us dive into, we've talked about a couple of posts that we may, or a couple of concepts that have been thrown at us already. We'll probably bring our buddy Wes Spencer on to talk about some of this stuff from the cybersecurity perspective. We had a couple of recommendations that I think he would have an interesting opinion on. But we're going to continue to do this. We're going to continue to deliver some education. Hopefully you guys found value in this one today. If you did, we'd love to hear about it. If you didn't, or if there was something that was missing, please throw it out there. Kyle, you mentioned a video on time tracking. Was that just for engineers, or does that also include things like vCIOs?
Right now it's just engineers, and I sent the link, but I can't message everyone for some reason in Zoom. Look at K7 leadership in YouTube, and you'll see a video saying deconstructing MSP profitability. Watch it though, because it does have some of these functions that vCIO will help you figure out budget if you are going to bundle in the service. So it gives you some ideas on how to manage that types of utilization. But it's an interesting idea that I think we do need to, at some point, we'll find the time. How do you start to build a best practice on doing vCIO service at a high level?
Well, I want to end with one thought. I don't give a shit what you call it. Take the actual deliverable that's going to, because this goes back to, just zero trust is my favorite example of this, right? There is no actual IT definition of zero trust that has actually been published by a standards organization, but we talk about it all the time. vCIO is the same thing, and it doesn't mean the same thing to that word doesn't mean the same thing to everyone who's doing it. So I want you guys to pick apart what you deliver and think about the deliverable. And is it a mature deliverable that drives your customer to buy a product from you? That's account management, right? That is land and expand account management. Is it something that helps your client ring the cash register faster and cheaper? Is it something that helps them gain internal efficiencies? Is it something that helps them get visibility into and manage the risk that's in their organization? That is a higher level service, with whatever you want to call it. That is a higher level service that you can justify a cost for, that you should compensate for the employee for differently, that you should track KPIs on differently, and that really is almost at odds with those account manager services where I'm trying to sell them something. Because a CIO might say, Mr. Customer, this is the level of risk you have, and I don't think it rises to the level of something you should pay for based on all the other things that are on your to-do list. While the account manager is over here going, well, I get a commission for this, I need to sell this thing, they got to buy it. And so I want you guys to pick apart the function, not the name. And I think that's where the real value of these last couple episodes lives. So if I can leave us with that, that's my last thought. Kyle, you got a last thought for everybody while they're headed out the door?
Man, you said it perfectly. Add us on LinkedIn. We'll keep posting this shit.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.